the laboratory component of my aquatic research takes place. I also have a dry lab up on the 3rd floor, so that's why Rachel's a little confused about the location. So you're going to visit a whole bunch of labs across the semester, I understand. Is this the first lab visit that you've had? Well, one of the things that Chris always asks us to do is to introduce ourselves and to give you a little bit of information about our history, because you're just embarking on a career in watershed sciences, hopefully in fisheries or aquatic ecology. And it might be interesting for you to hear about how people got into these different positions. And so I started off doing a bachelor's at UC Davis, and I was pre-vet in California. And I was taking a lot of hard science classes, and it wasn't really a fit for me. And then I scored an amazing job at Lake Tahoe at a research group. It's a lot like the one that we have here, where they were doing all kinds of fisheries and aquatic ecology research. And so, much to my disbelief, my summer jobs were to snorkel in Lake Tahoe and go scuba diving for fish in Lake Tahoe. And my winter jobs were to look at fish guts and look at fish scales and zooplankton, a lot like what you're going to see today. And I couldn't believe that you could actually get paid for this. So then I went back to UC Davis and I changed my major to from pre-vet to limnology, which is the study of aquatic ecosystems, essentially, lakes and streams. So, and then while I was doing that, I was working in the research lab at UC Davis. I was lucky enough to have Chris Lukey, your department head and instructor for this class, and Wayne Wurzbach, the limnologist for the department, had a research project going on there, even though they were at Utah State University. And so when they had an opening come up for graduate school, they encouraged me to apply, and I started a PhD program in the Sawtooth up in Idaho, working on sockeye salmon, which was sort of a mixture of a lot of limnology, a lot of zooplankton, and trying to make the system more productive for fish, as well as a lot of really neat conservation biology. And so those experiences, they were very linked. It was not just serendipity. Being in the research group at Tahoe Research Group at UC Davis led to the position that I got into graduate school. And you'll hear some more about that when we hear from these guys. And then when I finished my PhD, I went and worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Portland, Oregon on a whole bunch of controversial salmon topics. I picked up a bunch of quantitative skills that I didn't have, and it was a really great experience. And then the position here opened up as a professor in watershed sciences, which was actually a different department then. And I applied and got the position, and that was about 10 years ago. And now in this lab, we have a bunch of different research projects that cross lakes and streams. It seems to oscillate over time. Sometimes we have more stream work, and sometimes we have more lake work. The stream work is really focused on the conservation of native fishes and their habitat and the different limiting factors that determine their persistence ability and how well they're going to persist into the future under different climates and different habitat scenarios and that kind of thing. The lake work has been much more focused on trophic interaction, who eats who and who performs the best, and differences among different fishes and strains, and again, you'll hear some more about that today. So a big diversity of work in systems in Utah. Right now we have several different projects in Utah, but we have also projects reaching as far as Oregon and Washington and Nevada, as Nick will talk about. And so that's a little bit of an overview of the research that goes on here. I'll now have Gary Peavy introduce himself. Gary is the research associate here at Watershed Sciences, and he helps run the research lab.
I got my bachelor's degree at the University of Wisconsin in Madison in zoology, and then I thought I would be a little more interested in chemistry at the time, and then after that I got a job at Ohio State University just doing research at the lab there, and kind of really got into fisheries, and that's when I really enjoyed it a lot. And then I always knew that I wanted to go to graduate school, so then I came out to graduate school here in the early 90s and got a master's degree in fisheries. At the time it was the Fish and Wildlife Department here. I then went and joined the Peace Corps for a few years. Then I worked for the state of Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife as a fisheries biologist for a few years. And then when Phaedra got her position here, she was looking for someone to come and run her research lab, and so I've been here about 10 years also. But a lot of different paths as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do at the time. But I always knew, and I always tell folks that always think about getting that graduate degree at some point if you want to be a professional in the field like that.
But then also, just all of us had experiences working as an undergraduate in a research lab. And those experiences, in almost all of our cases, led to very much to what happened after that, to where we are today. And so, as you start to go through the next, 4 years of your academic career, make sure you get experience someplace. And we're often advertising in this lab, and it's often really, really neat work. Some of it is mundane. Sometimes it's counting zooplankton, but some of it is amazing, like snorkeling for bull trout in Oregon. So,
Yeah, one thing I did, the first job that I had, I spent just 2 months of the summer volunteering. So they provided a place for me to stay, but it was just volunteer. But that was the thing that got me into the next job, which actually was paid, and then the next job. So, I mean, sometimes the best window is to volunteer, especially when there's a lot of people out there looking for work. So I can't just, stress that enough.
This is Nick Redia. He's a new master's student in my research group, and he's actually been targeted today to talk about his research.
So like you said, my name's Nick. I'm originally from Michigan, where I went to high school there, and by the time I graduated from high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I decided to try college anyway, which probably wasn't a great idea. And I studied mechanical engineering with not too much drive, and kind of quit doing that. And then I took about 5 or 6 years off, and I'd always been really, really into the outdoors, a lot of hunting and even more fishing. I've always been really, really into fish. Done a ton of fishing growing up. And my parents always told me I should be in marine biology or fisheries biologist. I always just kind of blew them off. But then I moved to Wisconsin with my brother, and after taking school off for about 5 or 6 years, I decided to go back to school, and I went to the University of Wisconsin because I just wanted to be so much like Gary, and then got into a wildlife program there, wildlife ecology program. They didn't have an aquatic ecology program there for undergrads, but they do have a program for grad students, and through which I did all kinds of summer research at a field station in northern Wisconsin, and that was probably the most, I mean, even though I kind of knew I wanted to be in fisheries biology or something like that, I didn't fully understand what it entailed, and that was probably the most important thing, was going up to that station, meeting people, and seeing how the whole process works of, from start to finish, doing a scientific study. So, and then from there, I knew I wanted to go to grad school, and kind of wound up here then.
You find that there are maybe only 5 to 10 different places across the nation that people will go for fisheries and aquatic ecology, and they tend to sort of cycle through a lot of those. So University of Wisconsin at Madison is one of them. University of Washington in Seattle is another one. Utah State is one of them. Ohio State is another one. And so most of the people who are in graduate school around here come from one of those sort of 3 to 5 different institutions. And you're very lucky because USU was ranked in the top 5 colleges for fisheries about 4 years ago. If you're interested in fisheries and aquatic ecology, great place. Or just watershed sciences, I shouldn't be surprised. So the next thing that we're going to do is Nick is going to walk you through a little bit of an overview of how we tackle sort of the scientific process. And he's going to put it in the context of his graduate research, which is in Pyramid Lake in Nevada. A beautiful lake, looks a lot like Bear Lake if you're familiar with Bear Lake at all. Just Mediterranean blue, crazy island, and then just a perfect pyramid that looks like it could have come straight out of Egypt in the center of it. It's full of a bunch of highly endemic fish that are found only there, and no place else in the world. Very, very specialized fish. A kiwi, which is a very odd sucker, and Nick will probably talk about that. But he's just going to try and give you some sense of what it takes to go through this process of moving from some sort of a management question, something that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, in Nick's case, might be interested in, to a research question, to a graduate project, to a study design, to collecting data in the field, to bringing that data back here, and then how you could put that all together. And then when you get done with that short overview, we've got 4 stations here, and we'd like you to spend just a little bit of time looking at some of the different types of things that we do in the lab, zooplankton, diets, scales, etc., and they're all really neat to look at. Nick?
All right. So yeah, like Phaedra was saying, I'm just gonna kind of go through. Well, don't be too put off by the phrase scientific process. It's not gonna be that formal, but just kind of talk about my project and how we approach it, and from collecting data to writing it up, analyzing it, and to producing some type of theory. So the way it works, and a lot of you maybe have kind of seen this process before, but I'll just go over it real briefly. So it usually starts out with observations, from past studies or just from visual observations, where people go out into the field and they get a bunch of information, and they form a question or a hypothesis, and from that question or hypothesis they design an experiment or some type of test to try to understand the